It's been years since I've set eyes on the Halloween mask. It was a pumpkin, a white pumpkin. I'd never actually seen them in any other color other than orange before that moment, but something about that pallid, drooping latex made it seem cold and bloodless. I'd become much too old to go out trick-or-treating, so instead I took my place in the front door of our house and handed out sweets over to the new crops of tiny ghouls. Thankfully, I had my smartphone on me, and the music pumping through the earbuds kept me from going insane out of boredom. The house was nice though. It was a suburban foreclosure my parents had snapped up almost exclusively for the extra bathroom. I guess living in such close quarters with an adult child had more than run its course, if you'll excuse the oxymoron. I'm well aware I've been reduced to an oxymoron. It wasn't supposed to turn out that way, but college did very little for my job prospects. I barely learned anything. As a matter of fact, due to equal parts partying and often absent professors. "So, who are you supposed to be?" I asked the kid with an obvious Dracula costume.
"A blood guy,"
was his disappointing response. "Well, here you go." I tossed the candy bar into his bag. "Hey, don't bite any strange necks. You don't know where they've been." I got a facepalm from a child. The old cliche held true that night. Halloween had indeed become generic. I saw 5 more Draculas, a ton of witches, and more licensed cartoon characters than I could name. Worse yet were the kids, or even the teenagers, who threw on whatever they had lying around. Putting on your fancy church clothes does not make you a mobster or CEO or even the president. 2 tween girls showing up in just towels? Which was all kinds of wrong. It was around 11 o'clock when the stream of nougat-faced beggars finally began to dwindle. The candy was almost gone and, well, proving my parents were great about planning just about everything. They probably factored in the 10 pieces I would steal over the course of the evening. When I thought everything was done, when I put away the media player, when my hand reached to flick the switch and turn off the porch light. Shit! A loud sudden knock jarred me from my walking sugar coma. It was more of a solid palm strike than a knock. The frosted glass panes in the door rattled. "I mean, sit tight, kids, I'll be there." I grabbed the barrel bowl of candy and thrusted open the door. "Okay, who do we have?" There was no one. Not only were there no children at the door, but I couldn't see any family traveling anywhere in the neighborhood. Only the dim lights in the windows of my neighbors told me that there were indeed other human beings somewhere out there. "If you want to ding-dong ditch, you're supposed to ring the doorbell," I called out, careful to keep from bothering others in the quiet homes. I shook my head with a smirk, remembering how Halloween used to be one of those nights where I'd get into all kinds of trouble I could find. Only as I was about to close the door, did I notice that a gift had been left on the doorstep. Instead of a flaming bag of you-know-what, I saw a face staring up at me. Eyeless, toothless, expression snark and unflinching. It was a mask. The white pumpkin mask was created to look like as if the facial features had been rotted out, as opposed to being carved to look like a normal jack-o'-lantern. Something about this odd choice caused me a moment's pause. My brain took a jarring, stuttering half-step before it made the connection between face on the floor and harmless mask. "It's mine now!" I called out again, looking towards the bushes. I scooped the jiggling empty head off of the stone step and closed the door. Whoever left it there would have to come and ask for it back. At least, that's what I figured. "God, there's weird kids tonight!" I shouted up the staircase to the second floor where my parents had sat out the tradition. There was no response, and I figured they had failed to stay up at this late hour. Finally, I turned off the porch light and made my way to the living room, darkening each overhead light as I progressed. I liked nights, for the most part, because it was a quiet time when I had the full run of the house. Plopping down on the couch, I tossed the white pumpkin face on the coffee table and turned on the television.
With the Jaramajig, you can avoid these meal mistakes, and so much more.
Late-night television wasn't my thing, especially not infomercials. I cast a quick look towards my gaming console and pondered the late-night session. Getting in a short casual round wasn't really something I was up for either. When I played, I was in it for the long haul. I wasn't some ordinary gamer. I jumped, flinging the remote into the air as another loud bang echoed through the house. My surprise quickly turned into anger when I realized the kid must have been coming back for the mask. I grabbed the thing again and contemplated the idea of tearing it in half. "Coming!" I shouted. "Seriously, break down the door, why don't you?" As I passed the sliding glass door that led to the backyard, I noticed something that stopped me in my tracks. It was a jack-o'-lantern, crudely drawn on the glass with what looked like to be dog crap. Really? You gotta be kidding me! I stormed over to the door and peered out into the darkness. Someone, somewhere out there, was having fun with the wrong adult child. It was then that the smell wafted to me. It wasn't the rank smell of animal feces. It was sweet. Something comforting. Chocolate. Somewhat relieved, I turned away from the back door, fully intending to give the child out in the front a good piece of my mind. It wasn't until I was nearly out of the living room that I thought about the smell and how strong it was. Going back quickly into my mind, I came to a distressing conclusion. The crude drawing was on the inside of the glass. I could have done any number of things at that point. I could have leaped out into the back door and into the yard, calling for blood. I could have gone into the front and pulled that kid in by his collar, scolding him the whole time. In that moment, however, I took the third option. "Mom! Dad!" I flung the mask down and ran upstairs screaming bloody murder. "Get up! Someone's inside of the house!" When I opened their bedroom door, bursted through it. Actually, they weren't there. The bed was made, the lights were off, and the room was empty. "Are you still up?" I shouted, wheeling down the upstairs hallway. "Hey, did you guys hear what I said?" I pulled open the door to Dad's home office, fully expecting to see him hunched over boring paperwork, brow furrowed. When I entered, however, I found a quite different sight. My dad was at his desk, seated, his knees pulled to his chest and wrapped around his arms. His papers were strewn about, torn and crumpled. Not a single photo on the wall was straight, and many had their glass broken out. "Dad?" I whispered, as he just sat there on the oak pedestal, shuddering. He looked up at me, like a child coming out of a dream. On his head, he wore the same pale, horrible pumpkin mask I now held in my hand.
"Oh, hi."
He muttered, long strings of drool dangling from the mask's mouth.
"I'm just finishing up the Schweitzer report."
With that, he jerked his head to one side, his face turning to the ceiling, and let out a blood-curdling, agonizing scream. I backed out of the doorway, nearly toppling over the railing between myself and a nasty drop to the floor below. Propping myself up on the railing, then on the walls, I hurried to the bathroom where I'd last seen my mother going to prep for the night. "Mom! There is something terrible!" Once again, my entry was halted by the disorienting sight. There she was, my mother, sitting on the stool in front of the bathroom mirror, a mirror that was now cracked from what looked like a straight-on headbutt. She sat quietly in her bathrobe, its collar and shoulders stained with a touch of red, as she applied lipstick to the asymmetrical gap mouth of her white mask. "Mom!" I screamed. My brain once again lurched along like a smoky jalopy. She turned slowly, just as my dad had looked at me, and she threw the lipstick down with a crack as if she was enraged by my mere presence.
"Why aren't you in bed?"
she demanded nonsensically.
"Why aren't you asleep, Missy?"
In one smooth motion, Mom stood from the stool and wrenched a long, jagged piece of glass from the mirror. Her blood trailed down the length of the reflective blade as she raised it over her head and ran towards me.
"Why aren't you asleep?"
She shrieked with a shrill, demented tone I'd never heard before. I barely closed the door in time as she ran towards me. All at once, I felt the same dread I experienced as a child when I was about to be punished, mixed with the terror that only comes from knowing your life is about to end in the most unpleasant way possible. Sure of nothing now, I looked at the screen on my phone and started dialing. A blood-red hand came hard down on the phone, sending it to the floor. Quickly, I looked up to see my father standing over me.
No phone for a week.
He groaned, sounding as if the words were cut through a mouthful of something I didn't want to see. The first fist rocketed towards me. I lowered myself just in time as my dad's hand passed through the drywall inches away from me. Moving to escape, I was instead caught by my dad's other hand. A letter opener clenched therein jabbed into my side, as easily as if it were piercing a water balloon. When he crudely withdrew the blade, the fluid that sprayed forth stained the far wall. I screamed again, though this time it was some wordless, mindless howl that came from some primal place. Clutching the wound in my gut, I made my way down the stairs, stumbling and falling as I did so. I landed at the foot of the stairs with a heavy thud. There, I was reunited with the strange mask that had been left before me. It remained where I had thrown it, and its empty, wandering gaze seemed to say, "Bet you're glad you went up there, huh?" Another palm thrust at the front door. Go away! I screamed, crawling away from the noise as best as I could. Leave me alone!
Police officer,
A rough, authoritative voice came from beyond the door.
we've gotten complaints about the noise.
Thank God! I pulled myself up to my feet and hobbled to the door, hunching over in pain. I turned the knob, my blood streaking against the shiny golden orb, and pulled the door open with my last ounce of strength. Standing at the door was a tall man, dressed in a dark green suit and pants, a black shirt, and a necktie that seemed more than wound in braided vines. On his head, he wore the same mask I'd seen 3 times that night, though his was a vibrant green, with jagged thorns set in its mouth.
Trick or treat!
He said, mockingly. I couldn't run. I couldn't fight. All I could do was collapse with a soft whimper.
No, looks like someone already tricked you.
The masked man said in a tone that was anything but empathetic.
Well, don't worry. I'll take care of you from now on.
From there, things became a bit foggy. I must have blacked out and awakened several times as the masked man went to work. I remember blood, gauze, and stitches, and the cold service on the kitchen countertop. I remember the basement, my head striking against the wooden stairs as someone, that man, dragged me by my feet. I remember the secret doorway in the basement wall, one that none of us had found in the months that we had lived in that house. Most of all, I remember what the masked man said.
Forgive me for not introducing myself properly.
He dragged me to the middle of the stone floor and took a key ring off of a hook.
The name is Spooky Sam. Now, it may be a moniker I gave myself, but it'll do.
The masked man walked over to the bar door and placed a key in the lock. As he pulled the door open, a cadaver, a human corpse, fell forward and landed almost face to face with my all but paralyzed body. The corpse wore a white pumpkin mask.
This is my house, you see. The people down here were my friends, my trick-or-treaters. Oh, the fun we had together.
The man rolled the corpse to the side. My mother stepped into view, joining the masked man. I hadn't even known she was down there with us.
Unfortunately, things got kind of complicated. I had to go away for a while, and I couldn't really ask a neighbour to come by and feed him.
The man laughed as he led my now obedient mother into the cell and closed the door. I could hear the man opening another cell. Though I didn't turn my head to look, I had heard the soft fall of another corpse, followed by the heavy footsteps of my dad.
I suppose I'll miss them, in a way.
He stepped into my view again, this time holding the same mask that had been left for me earlier that night. He turned the mask inside out and placed a white cloth against the interior, right where the wearer's nose would be.
This probably doesn't make much sense to you right now.
The man flipped the mask right side out again.
But then again,
He slid the latex over my head, the smell of strong chemicals invading my nostrils.
you're not in your right head.
I can see why it happened now. I can see why it had to be this way. I was just a nobody, you know? A 20-something failure with no future. Then Spooky Sam came into my life. It makes sense when I think about it. I thought the masks made people insane. I know now it's the other way around. We're the ones with a solid grip on reality. Everyone else is just bonkers. So, as I said, it's been a year since this all happened. What a long year. What a long wait. Sam says it's almost time to come out and play with everyone again. Almost time for trick or treat.